this is how I want to be. I want to be able to bring across information in a manner that's clear and concise, and people can get what it is that I'm trying to say. So it's an ongoing work, progress, and I wanted to, I hope that I'm living up to that. His work has really helped me wake up to the reality of how, and in my case, how energy is negotiated in our region, in the Southwest, and in particular on Black Mesa, and who it's waking me to who the players are, who the major decision makers are, and the reason that they're making these decisions. And so even though it's being presented to our people, like in the case of Navajo Generating Station, that this is going to bring jobs and revenues to the tribe, there's always something more behind that. And so that's something that we have to look for in the research and in the work that we do with the people that we're dealing with. It's made me look at even our allies. We work with non-native environmental groups, and sometimes the way that they began is not always, you know, in the beginning, you know, we were naive and we think, okay, we're all on the same side. These non-Indian environmental groups are all with us and they want what's good for us and what's right for us. Well, it's because of Mr. Red House that I really woke up to the fact that that's not always the case. That there's also that they also have agendas that they're working towards, and those don't always align with ours, and that they want to protect the environment and don't necessarily want to do it the way we want to do it. And so I can't express enough how much it's really made everything full circle for me and made everything make more sense to me. So I want to say that much about John Red House to begin with. I live just south of Body Coal Company, and about 15 years ago I came home and started building a house. And I walked down to one of the springs near my home, and boy, 10 years goes by, you're off to school like the way people tell you to do, and you come back and there wasn't an answer for why the spring near where I lived and where I had just decided to build a home was now gone. And then I realized, talking to NTUA and all these people, that I wasn't going to get water for like probably 20 years. And I wasn't going to get electricity for like maybe 20 years. So I still live in an area where we have electricity now for about 15 years. But plumbing is just something that we're not going to see for quite a while in running water. So we're still people who, today, I don't want to make it seem like we've done this all this time, but we now haul water from some community well to where we live, and we really have to conserve the water carefully and use it in a way which, prioritize our use of it. And taking a bath is kind of like 3 or 4 down the line in priority. So washing and drinking is actually the first priority, and washing our dishes is probably like close second or third. So, and that's, I'm very conscious of that, and so that's the way I live. And so even though I work in Pinyon and have just been living in teachers there for just a few years now, I'm still very conscious of how I use my resources. But at the time I built my house, one of the things that came to my mind was, how am I going to live here? It just became a huge reality that I was now raising children, and their future just kind of flashed before my eyes. And I thought, if I can't live here, then what am I going to do? I just came back from the city, I came here thinking I'm going to do something here. Am I going to go back to the city? Am I going to go to the border town? If I go to the border town, then I come home on weekends and I watch my family struggle. My family is still sheep herders, farmers. I'm a farmer. They're weavers. They very much enjoy the life that they live. I grew up never knowing that this was a hardship way of life, that there was, I grew up knowing it was hard, but we loved all of it. We knew where our food came from. We knew where our water came from. We knew where the corn came from. You know, we knew where all the elements, these things that sustain us, we knew where they came from. They didn't come from bashes. They didn't come from somewhere else where, you know, we knew where they came from. I had grown up with relocation all my life, so what John Redhouse said about activism, accidental activism, I think that happened to me, and I just became this person that was now struggling for my livelihood. Even though I had 2 degrees under my belt, those didn't mean a thing. So today when I go to the communities, I never say I have a degree in this and a degree in that, and you know, and try to say I have been educated in the Western way. What I do try to convey to our people and our elders is that, look, this is what you taught me about our culture and our way of life. These are the things you told me it's important. These are the offerings you told me that I have to make. This is the way that my relationship to the water. This is my relationship to the earth, Shumana Hassan, my mother. This is my relationship to the water, Shumah Hoisan, my mother. This is my relationship to the fire. I'm the keeper of this fire stick, the fire poker. I'm the one that has to decide the destiny of my children, and therefore I need to prepare my prayers in that way. Now, how is that going to guide us for this next generation? And what's the cause of this water situation that we're facing? The cause, of course, goes back to the mining industry that began in our neighborhood about 4 decades ago. And the more we research, and once again through Mr. Redhouse's work, we found out that the entire state of energy is being held hostage by the state of Arizona, and how energy begins, the beginning of the source of the energy began in Black Mesa, when the coal was being dug and the water, pristine groundwater, supported the mining. That coal went to Navajo Generating Station. That electricity was sent down south. That electricity piped the water from the water from the Colorado River to Phoenix and Tucson. It was tightly connected. The coal was committed to one place. The electricity is committed to one place. The Navajo Nation signed these leases and contracts that were not necessarily in the best interest of the nation, especially today. As the nation got bigger, the royalties didn't get bigger. As the nation got bigger, the benefits to the nation actually diminished. We're at this point where we have this opportunity to renegotiate. At the time they were originally negotiated, you know, jobs were promised. You know, people were told this is temporary, minimal impacts will be made. This much could go to the local tribal college, and so on and so forth. Today, we have this opportunity, I believe, to realign those lease agreements with what is more diné, something that's essentially not going to degrade the environment, because through this entire 4-decade process, we've seen a lot of degradation of the environment, the air, the water, and that's a huge cost to the people. We're not people who they can relocate and send to Albuquerque, buy us all houses, and we'd be living here. That's just not going to happen. We have a reservation that was given to us, our land's given to us through this treaty, and, you know, you've got to take care of it. think that's the bottom line. What I see, what we're essentially working towards is basically a future that's not based on the destruction of the environment. The technology's there, the renewable technology's there. We've got to figure out a way to do this in which there's not a huge cost to the health of the people and to the environment of the people. When we're talking about the future of the people, we're also talking about clean air and clean water and productive lands. That's just not going to happen if you have land that's toxic from mining. You're not going to be able to farm there, grow corn, and have healthy corn. All the heavy metals and the toxins are going to be inside that food that you're trying to grow. So we've got to do this. We have the opportunity to do it right. And I think that opportunity is upon us now. And so we just had 800 miners and NGS workers lobby the Navajo Nation just recently. And what's really concerning to me is that they are thinking about themselves and their livelihood, which is very important. But we're talking about something broader. We're talking about the lives and the health of many people and the natural elements, life-giving elements of life. And so we're talking about something broader than what they're trying to fight for. What I think they don't understand is that we're all on the same side. They're concerned about their livelihood. We're concerned about finding an alternative to what's happening here. If we destroy our homelands, nothing's going to live. And everybody's going to be running away from the places that we create as Superfund sites. And everybody's going to be trying to find places upwind from the coal ash and upwind from the toxic pollution. And we have to think about those things too. So I think that when we're doing this work, just one last thing, I know when time is up, but one last thing I want to say is that I mentioned this earlier in the workshop that I had, is that when we're doing this kind of work, it's crucial that we're looking at the research and the data and fishing for everything that's out there. At the same time, we're constantly looking to the medicine people and the traditional teachings and using that as a guiding force to how we're going to strategize and how we're going to build this new vision for our future. A lot of people say, that's a backward way of life that you're wanting. You want to go back to sheep camp and sheep herding and farming? That's backwards. And I was telling an important leader just this week, I went to the Midwest. People there farm 500 acres of land and have animals in their backyard and grow their own beef. You can't tell me that's a backward way of life. This way that I'm fighting for. We have to eat. What's wrong with me growing my own food? Do I have to let Monsanto or Frito-Lay or whoever, Safeway, be the one to put food on my table? Why is it wrong that I want to put my own food on my own table? What's wrong with that? Every day, somebody's driving through Black Mesa wanting a sheep, either for their family to eat or some ceremony they're putting on. Every day, somebody's driving through looking for blue corn or white corn or yellow corn because, certain types of food specifically are made with these different types. I said, where are you envisioning for us to go that you're saying this? And he basically pulled back and said, I have to look at all the sides. So I think grassroots people, environmental people, I've really put a lot of thought to this. I'm thinking about things are creative, innovative, really, really thinking about the future and articulating in a way that really needs to be heard. And I think that that's one of the things we're doing is we're keeping the tradition, we're using the tradition to guide us. We're using the research to help support us. And we're just trying to forge a way into the future which we're not destroying ourselves while we're doing it, or our neighbor, our relatives. It's kind of like, okay, let's choose how many of your relatives you want to, take out, while how many of you want to continue forward. It's not like that. I think we all want to go in that direction. So, thank you for your time. I asked to be first because I am dealing with a family situation at this time, and so I want to be back tomorrow morning for a funeral. So I thank you for your time, and I really appreciate this audience here. And I just want to mention real quickly that Clee is Chinalik. We come from the same area, Black Mesa. So and he's doing great work as well. So go on in if you have all of you.
I'll give you 5 minutes.
Oh, you with a hand?
I have a paper.
Oh, yeah. Again, my name's Kay Matthews, and I wanted to address a couple of things. First, I first heard about John when I was the fire lookout over in Mount Taylor. It was actually La Mosca Peak, which is the peak right next to Mount Taylor. And this was in the mid-1970s when they were doing all the when Gulf Minerals and all the big uranium companies, Homestake, were doing all the exploration right at the base of Mount Taylor, driving these drill rigs through the national forest and sinking these holes looking for uranium deposits. The San Mateo mine was in full operation, and Homestakes and Decolonization mine by Wacket. So I heard about there were a lot of people organizing, trying to deal with uranium exploration. But I mostly want to talk about as an activist and as a journalist, and talk about building relationship as an activist, and then how that you have to relate that to being a journalist by being part of that relationship. I mean, mainstream media, I guess news reporters would say they have their sources, but as an alternative journalist, I have to have my community. I have to have people I work with politically, and the intersection of journalism and activism is tight. I lived for 20 years in a land grant community in Placitas at the north end of the Sandia Mountains. And then my family and I moved to a tiny little community up north called El Valle, which is also a land grant community. So a lot of the work that we were involved in was forestry-related work. Both of those communities are in the national forests. And then my experience on Mount Taylor being right smack dab in the middle of Seaboard National Forest and how forest policy was affecting Native communities. Relationally, when we started, they started releasing forest plans in the mid-1980s, and one of the first ones they released was the Seaboard Forest Plan, which affected Mount Taylor, of course. It's one of the districts in Mount Taylor District. So a lot of folks from Acoma and Laguna became active, and we formed a loose-knit group that fought the forest plan. It was calling for a ski area on Mount Taylor and a second ski area in the Sandia Mountains. And folks from Tonatsin got involved from the South Valley, land grant community people, and sort of the people from the Pueblos and the land grants. The land grant in Placitas, the San Antonio de los Huertos land grant got involved, and there were Anglos involved. And that was a learning experience for me, for sure, how to be sensitive and get along with all these various communities who have the same thing at stake, but as she mentioned, come at it from different cultural backgrounds and different cultures. So I learned a lot during that. We lost a lot in that battle, although there is no ski area on Mount Taylor, and there is no second ski area in the Sandia Mountains. And then when we decided to move up north to northern New Mexico, I was able to bring a lot what I learned from political activity down in closer to Albuquerque and the relationships that have been formed there. And we actually formed another watershed community up in the Peñasco area, and it was actually instigated by the folks at Pueblo Pueblo, because they were concerned about activity in the upper watershed that was going to affect the water as it flows through Pueblo. So, and it was a land grant community, so the Hispanic community got involved, a lot of the Acequia people got involved. They were concerned about water use and maintaining not only quantity but quality of water in the communities up there. And it was just kind of I'd already written for several alternative newspapers along the way. I don't know, do any of you remember Sears Catalog from the South Valley? Or North? I guess it was put out, the people who ran it were in the North Valley, but it was spelled S-E-E-R. Yes. And they started out doing a lot of work on the uranium exploration on the Navajo Mission and out in the Grants area. So I got involved with them, and so I just continued to write. And as the watershed group up in the north got more and better organized, it became obvious that there needed to be a voice, there needed to be a medium for not only to advocate for the communities, but also as a forum for people to be involved. And so we started La Jicarita News, it was called back then. And it was a hard copy monthly newspaper, and it was all put together by a very small group of folks. But it was a small group of folks who did the editing and publishing, but who were part of a much, much larger group of folks. And we also, as she was talking about what came down, this was mostly during the mid-1990s, and what was going on there again was trying to deal and protect access to resources for the local communities. And not only did we end up fighting the forces, we ended up fighting urban environmentalists. And there were a lot of hangings in effigy. There were a lot of demonstrations. It was a pretty critical time, but fortunately, those people who had developed these relationships, who lived in the communities, who were Anglo, understood what was at stake. And so there was kind of at one point some of us started not calling ourselves environmentalists anymore because they had such a negative connotation in terms of urban environmentalists trying to impose their kind of a biocentric view of what the communities were fighting for. And so that was during the 1990s, and La Jicarita, boy, got right involved and managed to piss a lot of people off along the way, but also to, I think, fill a much-needed void in these issues that really weren't being covered in the corporate press. So, in terms of what's going to, and now that we have the paper, a hard copy that we distributed across northern New Mexico for 15 years. And my partner, Mark Scholler, died in 2010, so I didn't know whether I was going to be able to continue it. But fortunately, I hooked up with David Correa and a couple of other folks, and we decided that it was going to segue into an online journal. And I felt badly in some regard because Roxanne was on our mailing list. She got her monthly copies. I felt bad that we left print journalism. We had to give it up, but I also felt like I couldn't manage it. Dave was down in Albuquerque and affiliated with the university, and it just seemed that's what the profession is. So we went online, and it's been good. I mean, I can't believe how many people I've now come in contact with through the dissemination online. You know, it's open to comment, and we cover a broad range of issues. Again, from all the years that I spent as a political activist and as a journalist covering issues with Los Alamos National Laboratory, all the nuclear manufacture of nuclear bombs there. We've extensively covered the uranium, the threat of more developed uranium in the Grants area. We still cover a lot of forest issues. The Forest Service is in terrible shape, and as you know, our forests are in terrible shape. And a lot of folks are trying to figure out what to do. And again, it's coming down to the people who know the forest and who are involved and live in the forest are the ones who are going to have to take things in hand and determine how we're going to make healthy forests again. The Forest Service, we fought them for years and years, and now that they don't have any money, maybe it's going to be easier to kind of work around the Forest Service. But again, it's going to take money, and it's going to take a lot of work. We cover grazing issues. Eric Schultz, who's been working as one of the co-editors, has been covering the controversy on the biosecurity unit about access to grazing, that the district has reduced the level that cattle that can graze in a couple of the associations, so we're working on that. And David has been covering a lot of what's been going on in the Albuquerque Police Department, which I'm sure you're aware of. And we've been doing a great job with that. And what am I missing? So just a real gamut of environmental and social justice issues. And I guess trying to answer the question of where we're going to go and to try and deal with this is, I guess I have to stress that relationships are the most critical. And to be an activist, you have to really be involved in the community, maintain the relationships that you've developed over all those years, and also you don't want to preach to the choir, so you have to get that voice out there, and that's where the media comes in. And if you can speak for those who are doing the organizing, but also those who just want to live in these communities, and like she was saying, maintain a way of life that has been lived for hundreds of years in these communities in northern New Mexico. She again says, you know, what we're struggling for is to put the water to beneficial use, to use that acequia water to grow food, to maybe develop some niche crops that you can sell on the market, to allow people to continue to live on the land in northern New Mexico, be it on the pueblos or in the land-grant communities. But as the water, we cover a lot of water issues. That's a big one. I should have been now. As the water becomes more and more of a market commodity, the communities up north are going to be more and more important, figuring into how to keep that water on the land. Did you give me a time? Okay. So that is, I guess, my look to the future. We have to figure out again how to not romanticize the past, but how to figure out how to save and maintain. Because I don't like to use the word preserve, because we're not preserving anything. We're maintaining a way of life and allow people to grow their own food, cut their own firewood, build their own houses, make their own abilities. And those people who can act as a buffer to the suburbanization and urbanization of the country. I mean, that's where we are. We're sitting up there on the land.
Okay, so my name is Laura, and like I said before, or as I was introduced, I'm from the Creek Nation, and most people probably know the backstory, but I'm going to tell it. So we're originally from the southeast, and we were comprised of 50 autonomous tribal towns. And then through federal Indian policy, we were displaced to Oklahoma, where we are now. And as we were displaced, they carried embers from the ceremonial grounds and reestablished place. But so part of what came with that being displaced is that we were removed from our original lands. But a lot of the areas that we resettled still resemble the woodlands from home. We still practice our dances and that sort of thing. I will say that there are two explicit factions within our nation. We have your traditional stomp dance folks, and you have your Christian folks that are Baptist, Methodist, and I would say that the stomp dance folks are very tolerant of the Christians, but it doesn't go the other way around. And within our tribal government, actually our seal is based on a scripture from the Bible. So I come into my work not really having a lot of faith in our tribe, in our tribal government. And so kind of picking up on this idea of sovereignty, which I'm going to address in a moment. But I kind of want to start first with, after kind of explaining my people, I want to start first with how I enter into this work. So there's a quote that goes, "When an old man dies, an entire library burns to the ground." And that's an African proverb. And my work in the past has been doing oral history workshops, participatory mapping workshops, explicitly to see knowledge transfer from elders to youth, or even to capture the stories of our elders and their knowledge about place, and just to learn about the culture and that sort of thing. And so, kind of in a past life and a current life, I worked, and I have worked in GIS. I continue to work in GIS. I was very much a technocrat, but seeing how other indigenous peoples in the world were using mapping in different ways to support claims in international rights regime and within their own settler colonial rights regimes, I saw that they were able to take these mapped oral histories and have their claims to the land. So Maori, First Nations up in Canada, and they were able to enter those into court. And I saw in Australia how indigenous folks, they were using more ephemeral maps, a stick in the sand, to manage a prescribed burn over an area. So I found all of that really fascinating, and that's sort of how I entered into my work. So through my work of hearing the oral histories, bearing witness to people's stories, one of the things that really emerged out of that is this idea of a very fatalistic trajectory that indigenous peoples are on, and that's in 100 years there won't be indigenous people, or our nation will disappear, our tribe won't be here. In 100 years we won't have our language anymore. In 100 years our plants will be gone, because as I'm doing the mapping and map biographies and I'm asking them, tell me where you grew up, tell me where you played. And then they're telling me, oh, we played in this stream, but it's not even a stream anymore. Or we used to fish for this particular fish and now it's endangered. Or in Cherokee, North Carolina, it was we used to go and gather this particular plant, but now the National Park Service encroached upon our homeland, displaced us, and gated it off. And so, you start hearing these stories and you start figuring out how to use that as claims, as evidence in a rights claim. So I come at this in two different ways as well. I come at it from a grievance model, trying to understand how to take the work and argue it well with an airtight argument in the settler colonial rights regime. But on the flip side, the other work is from a non-grievance model, because I couldn't imagine myself my entire life being a fight against somebody that's oppressing me. Where is the peace that comes where we're building and progressing as people and building our strength? So there's the part, where we had some elders speaking earlier in the day about, we have these songs and these stories that sustain us. And so I kind of had two trajectories that I work in. And one is this grievance model where I can fight if need be, and I've learned the tools to fight. And the other is a non-grievance model where, learning about the stories, learning what they mean in place. And so what I was saying before, that I was hearing this common story emerge, a fatalistic trajectory that we won't be here, we'll have nothing. So my key question in my work then was, what do we have to do to disrupt this path? We don't have to choose to continue on this path. What do we have to do to disrupt it? And so I was hearing this at the community level. And I'm speaking for my own community, Muskogee Creek Nation. A lot of folks didn't have, and don't have faith in the tribal government to handle things for them. So I took it on myself to basically do a study and just start asking people, where do you see the tribe in X number of years? What do you value? And this is where the Indigenous planning piece comes in. I'm a professor here in community and regional planning. So really formulating a planning approach and thinking ideologically, methodologically, and practically. How do you make it happen in practice? So ideologically, it's really identifying what is the worldview of the people, what do they value, and asking them. And then methodologically, I think most of us have read Linda Tui-Highsmith's book and this idea of decolonizing methodologies. So deploying some of those, there's one section where she has 20 different ideas that you can take into a community. Storytelling, bearing witness, giving testimony, I don't know, there's all kinds of stuff that you can do. So my idea was how to take these decolonizing methodologies and put it in a planning process so that you can understand what do the people want. And it's not like, your typical planning, city planning type of deal where, okay, we put up a notice, we're having a hearing, now come and sit and we're going to speak at you and come get on this microphone. And a lot of Indigenous people, they don't necessarily work like that. How can you even do the kind of approaches where people don't have to talk? Maybe they can write on a Post-it note and you can create a historical timeline of your community together and analyze it together. So I don't necessarily like to use this idea of bottom up, but there is like a top-down kind of deal, top echelon that I see happening with tribal governments. And that's where I really wanted to situate the work that I do and the Indigenous planning work and have it rooted in the community and what they value and what their worldviews are. So after talking with people, I did interviews, I worked with folks they helped me formulate a survey and ground truth it. I got about 300 surveys back. I gave it out at our tribal festival. And some of the key things that I saw emerge as values that are sustaining, whether you're Christian or whether you are a stomp dance person, and that's that people care about community, they care about helping one another. They were saying some of the same issues coming up in their communities, and that's around violence and that sort of thing. So for the work that I do, it was really trying to come up with thinking about how the tribe can re-articulate the ways in which it does re-articulate a settler colonial regime. And a lot of what it does is normative governance practices that aren't necessarily approachable by the community. So what I'm getting at is that when you start talking about settler colonialism and the way that a settler is defined and a migrant is defined, a migrant is somebody that comes there with the intent not to install a new polity at the expense of the Indigenous polity and governance. So the settler comes to install their own at the expense of the Indigenous polity and install their own notion of sovereignty. So that's where I want to get back at sovereignty and kind of this other direction that I'm thinking of in terms of sovereignty and what I'm terming as radical sovereignty. So not something that's defined within our nation-state regime, but something that can be defined within communities. I know I wanted to write a chapter because Creeks like to play softball. Softball is sovereignty. And I really see like the articulation of who you are as a tribal person and how you articulate that in your daily life. I see that as sovereignty, that it doesn't have to happen within this nation-state kind of context. So the other thing too is the reason that I kind of spent time formulating that is because I did grow up within Creek Nation. You know, I was really cognizant of planning problems in my own community because we were talking about this in one of my classes. They built our housing, it was a HUD housing subdivision. They built it by a dump. And I've heard that come up several times, that a lot of Indian housing subdivisions are built near dumps. And we didn't have any sense when we were kids. We're like swimming in the stream next to the dump, and we never put it together. So, I mean, like the planning issues came up. So I have like my identity and culture and that sort of thing grounded in this place. So the other piece is the geography piece, because I'm a geographer. And it's this idea that we don't have to stay tethered to the places where they assigned us. And another thing that came up was an article that we were talking about this morning with the New York Times and the migration of Native people to urban areas. So we really have to think about how we're going to handle that. And so this idea of sovereignty, how does sovereignty get articulated in urban areas? So I spent the last 7 years surviving in Los Angeles, and I only had enough money to go home once a year. So it was really difficult. Fortunately, I have my daughter, but I really had to stop and think, what does it mean to be Creek? What does it mean to be sovereign and not have to stay tethered to a place that was assigned by the settler colonial state? So those are some of the places where I see emerging in terms of how we think about human emancipation and liberation. How are we going to think through this geography of not being containerized to reservations and assigned spaces, but people have to make a living and live, and they're migrating to urban spaces. So how are we going to kind of handle that? And how are we going to organize people there and that sort of thing? So.
Who's more qualified to do I'm not. I feel like continuing that discussion is so interesting. So many ideas. Well, I want to praise John first and thank him for everything he's done and being I don't know, just an inspiration always since the first time I heard of him, before I even met him. But when I came here for 3 years, 1978 to 81, to try to revive the Native American studies that had kind of, come from Kiva Club and, the demonstrations, and was an activist, and then the administration kind of abandoned it. It was just kind of a hangout, and so my task was supposedly to build it, rebuild it. And I was so fortunate, we were so fortunate that John and Carol were here. They were always available. They may not even remember this, although John seems to remember everything. But down in that bar on Central, we could always go there and have, just sometimes I think I was crying about, just being rebuffed by the administration and then having to deal with all these things and all the different, problems in academia, but also wanting to make Native American studies a base for the communities, for the Pueblos, for the Apache, all the different Apaches, for the Navajo, that it be theirs, useful to them. So it wasn't just building a structure within the university, but really trying to make that happen. And John was out there, outside the academy, so it was always a reminder when I would be tempted to just, let's just build something inside here in this academic department and forget about it. But it was, it was a constant reminder of doing the right thing. And I was thinking, that John never had an agenda in the sense of a personal or a career agenda. His agenda was liberation and decolonization. And I think that's what we all have to aspire to and question, our career goals and the choices we make, because it's so easy in this country to rationalize and go toward the money, go toward the celebrity, go toward the attention. Everyone likes to be loved and admired, and that usually is translated into how much money you make, how many status symbols you have, and sometimes that can even be a status symbol or simply being admired, not necessarily money if you're an organizer, whatever. So that's what John represents to me, is no agenda other than liberation. And it really keeps you honest, to constantly check yourself against that, and how you also teach students and be a model of that, not just tell them, this is the way you should think, but be that. And so that's my, I could go on and on about John, but what I want to do is address that agenda of decolonization and liberation. And I don't know, I thought about several things to say, but I guess what's most pressing on me and what I've been involved in the last 6 years of my life is writing a book. That's the hardest book I've ever written. And I love to write books, and it's been fairly easy in the past, but this is a book that I was asked to write by a publisher, Beacon Press, and I said, of course, that will be easy. It's a history of the United States from the indigenous people's perspective. And it comes out of the People's History of the United States and Howard Zinn. It's the same publisher, Beacon Press. Before Howard died a couple of years ago, he suggested to them that they have different perspectives on people's history, and so it's a part of a series. And he suggested me, because I was always criticizing him for, introducing this wonderful section on what happened to Native Americans and genocide, perfectly politically correct, and then they disappear completely until, Alcatraz. Well, what happened? The 17th century, and then Jackson got them all out, I guess, and then Wounded Knee, and then, it's just barely mentioned. So I was always criticizing him and saying, in the revision, you should do this and that. So I think he got his revenge on me by suggesting I write this book. It's really, really hard because it is such a negative, depressing story, the history of the United States. It is just no getting around it. I think it's Jody Bird that said, you can probably quote her better, or where's Alicia? He knows that the history of the United States is a crime scene. That's what she said. It's a crime scene. And so you have to do a procedural. And when I finally settled on, just how to write this as a procedural, is, really taking it apart. But the first thing I had to do